This is the FM Gold channel of All India Radio. In the program News Analysis, now we bring you a discussion on the various aspects of Land Acquisition Bill. The participants are Yamini Agarwal, Indian Institute of Finance, and Ujwal Naryan, Senior Journalist.
Today, the land acquisition bill is the talk of the town. Just wanted to understand what is this bill all about, how it is benefiting the farmer, how it is helpful for the development of society.
Well, when you talk about the land acquisition bill has been much in question for the last couple of years, and primarily because there are a large number of projects from the private sector as well as from the government sector which continue to remain stalled, or which are not giving, or which are not being initiated, or which are not being completed because the acquisition of land has not taken place. And as a result, there is of time as well as cost overruns which the governments are bearing on these stalled projects. Now, whether it is because of the environmental clearances that these projects are not started, or because the land acquisitions are not started, they're costing the country in terms of the development, especially the infrastructure development, whether it is the energy sector, whether it is roads, railways, or other infrastructure that is concerned, whether it is development of the industrial corridors, whether it is development of other facilities, whether it is education, healthcare, or others. So when we talk about land acquisition, we are talking about development of social economic infrastructure. We're talking about creating facilities, especially in terms of providing the basic input, which is the land, for developing defense, developing rural infrastructure, affordable housing, industrial corridors, and so forth. With the land acquisition bill in place, it is likely that since this infrastructure would be much in place, we are likely to achieve a growth rate of about 8 to 8.5%, which is much projected by this year's budget by the Finance Minister Arun Jaitley. It's also believed that though the International Monetary Authority or the other international agencies believe that we are not likely to achieve 6.5% growth rate or less, or let's say more than that, we do believe that with this land acquisition bill and with the projects coming in place, we will be able to achieve an 8 to 8.5% growth rate.
So what are the difficulties government and the concerned agencies are facing after the implementation of the Land Acquisition Act 2013?
The land acquisition bill has already been passed in the Lok Sabha, and it is likely to be tabled for the Rajya Sabha. So it needs a sufficient amount of consent from the members from the Rajya Sabha to be passed. Again, what is more important than the consent of the Rajya Sabha representatives is the social acceptability to this particular ordinance. I believe that this ordinance is likely to bring about greater employment for the rural youth, which is expected to be about at least 50,000 employment for the rural youth. It is likely to bring about greater incomes. It is likely to reduce the costs in terms of, let's say, transportation, costs in terms of power, costs in terms of other things. Let's say, for example, for the stalled projects which we have about 8.8 lakh crores which is stuck there, out of which government projects alone is about 161 projects that are there of 1.8 lakh crores, and private projects are about 585 projects overall, and about 7 lakh crores which is stuck. Primarily, again, the main reason is that they are not able to acquire land. If you take in terms of the GDP, they are about 6.9% of the GDP value, which these projects are supposed to actually bring about an investment. And if they bring about this investment, there is likely to be a multiplier effect, which is going to be observed in the GDP growth rates, which is likely to be observed in the income levels, and which is obviously likely to then create the required consumption, investments, and other aspects in the economy, taking it to a higher level. We also see that a lot of those projects which have been stalled primarily because of not having sufficient amount of land acquisition is in the electricity sector, where about 80 projects are stuck. 75 are in generation, 5 are in distribution, and out of which about 54 are private projects. So when you talk about these amendments which are introduced by the government for the land acquisition, they are likely to actually bring about projects which are by public-private partnership in socio-economic infrastructure and in strategic areas, even in defense. So when we say that this particular land acquisition bill is for the country, it is for everyone, and especially for the common man, because it is likely to actually reduce the prices in terms of the costs of, let's say, transportation, costs of inputs, and overall costs of the goods and services which are being provided in the economy.
As you were saying, there are 5-6 more areas which has been given concessions against that consent clause: defense, rural roads, rural electrifications, infrastructure, and also dedicated freight corridors. So, in the earlier bill, what were the problem which was not helping or which was not enabling the government or the civic authorities to get land acquisition done in these areas?
When we talk about previous provisions in the previous bill, they were not too much of a difficulty, but it is a problem that we are observing, that the projects remain stalled, as we mentioned. And if you're not able to acquire the land in time and you're not able to implement the project in time, as I mentioned, there would be time and cost overruns. So if you're starting a project of about 100 crores, the cost escalations go up to 120, 150% higher. And even the time, if it's suppose the project was supposed to be completed in, let's say, 5 years, it takes about 15 years. So sometimes because land acquisition is not there, because of other regulatory approvals are not there, there are these costs that are associated with the project which increase the overall cost of the project. Now once the cost of the projects are increased, the overall goods and services which the project was likely to produce, let's say example electricity, example other, let's say road transportation or other things, once they were produced, they were likely to actually reduce the costs for the overall economy. Now, if the projects are not implemented, not executed, these costs will not come down. And if they don't come down, the overall industry in terms of, let's say, developing goods and services will not benefit. And if they don't benefit, they cannot become competitive and they cannot drive the economy to a higher GDP growth rate.
Industrial corridors has been also provided a special status in the new bill. How much they will help employment generation in rural area?
Well, they're saying that, when you're talking about these industrial corridors, somewhere or the other it's misunderstood that these industrial corridors will have compulsory acquisitions from the farmers to, any limit. That is, there is a certain amount of a limit, there is a ceiling that we're looking at. We're also they're providing that, let's say, if you talk about industrial corridors, 1 kilometer on either side of the roads, the compulsory acquisitions are looking at. I believe when we talk about these compulsory acquisitions from the farmer side, that much amount of a contribution from the farmer side to the development of the economy would not harm the farmers or the others so much, as well as it will bring value to all the countrymen. Now, when we talk about investment in industrial corridors, a simple statistics which has been given by economic survey, it's not for the industrial corridors though, and the overall employment generation, but it talks about the multiplier effect which is supposed to be there. So if you only spend about Rupee 1 for, let's say, making an investment in railways, it is likely to multiply to about 7.5 rupees. So you can imagine if you actually make investment even in industrial corridors, they're likely to multiply in terms of investments and other things, and they're likely to then bring about a greater national income in our economy. And because of this national income, people will have disposable income in their hand, and automatically there will be a higher level of consumption and a higher standard living for them.
There is also a position that new bill restrict the farmer from getting higher level of compensation, which was earlier in bill. So what is your take?
Well, this bill actually provides that they will be looking at the compensations, as far as I understand. They do want to look at, let's say this bill talks about how the compensations should be there, how the bill should look at, let's say, the transparency in land acquisitions, the rehabilitations or the resettlements that are there. They don't want the projects to be stalled for just like the way the Narmada Valley project got stalled or the other projects keep getting stalled. So when we talk about, let's say, compensations, these compensations, let's say for the rural area, they're providing for 4 times the market price which is there for the land. And for the urban area, it's supposed to be twice the price that is supposed to be there. They're saying they're likely to keep it intact as of now, but they will review it and they will give consideration to the changes that might be there. Also, they are providing for quick redressals for any grievances which might be there. There are certain provisions which don't make it very likable for a democratic setup. Let's say an action initiated against a government official will need a government approval. Now, since in a democratic society you do require that there should be more transparency, if this kind of a structure is there, there might be some cost associated. We do understand that we have problems of corruption, we do have problems, other things in the machinery which need to be rooted out. And then I believe the redressal structures may be able to help them over there.
You are saying that redressal structures should be more transparent.
And any democratic setup should provide for a constructive criticism, which means that if there is a reason to believe that the compensations are not right, there should be a setup provided for reviewing those compensations. If there are certain farmers or certain sets which are not feeling that they are getting the advantages from a particular land acquisition, let's say employment, let's say livelihoods, let's say other things, then there should be a social welfare structure that should be developed with it, which needs to be communicated to the farmers. So this particular opposition where the rallies are going on or the other things are going on is going to give this government an opportunity to reach back to the farmers and tell them that where you contributed, where the farmers, I remember when this government was going in for elections, they were contributing iron for the Sardar Patel statue, which was somewhere or the other showing that we are looking in for an integrated India, a developed India. And so the farmers need to be communicated that when they actually contribute their lands by taking right compensations, they will also create developments not for themselves but for their future generations in terms of employment, in terms of a better infrastructure, in terms of growth. And that needs to be communicated. There is a gap of the communication that is going on right now. And if that is misunderstood, then there is likely to be an unrest among the farmers. If that is well understood and it is well taken, then there is likely to be less unrest.
As you are saying, there is a miscommunication between the government and the farmers.
There is no miscommunication. There is a certain amount of, let's say, the manner in which you are perceiving the bill to be taken. These 5 main areas where they are making an issue out of why you have made private enterprises into private entities, or why you've outlined these 5 areas, or where the compensations they are saying is not correct, or this is supposed to be a draconian law. These are not the correct perceptions which are likely to be created. They need to create a perception where the farmers need to be made contributors to the development and growth of this country, just like the way they contributed for the Sardar Patel's statue. Similarly, any person while he is contributing his land, compensations should be given to them. Besides that, this particular bill or any acquisitions should also ensure that they provide for livelihoods and futures for the farmers. I remember in case of some states, there were heavy compensations given to the farmers and which they actually drained out in luxury goods. Let's say buying big cars, spending on liquor because there was not sufficient amount of education for them, there was not bank accounts for them. This government has already opened bank accounts. Jan Dhan Yojana is already in place. They can actually provide farmers. They've also concentrated on education, skill development. They will then lead to a future development and growth for the farmers, for them to believe that once they contribute their land, they don't lose an asset, but they probably are going to gain some asset in terms of their social development.
There is one more criticism that government is playing in the hand of industrial houses while doing this amendment to land acquisition bill, which 5 sector which government is saying that they have little bit loosen up. So are these 5 sectors are really of industrial houses interest?
Defense is a strategic sector. It's an interest for all countrymen. So we can't say it's for the industry. It's for every person. You talk about rural infrastructure. Rural infrastructure again is for all people. I mean people who are staying in the rural areas. It is likely to bring about benefit for all those industries which are likely to invest over there. You talk about affordable housing. That's for the common man. You talk about social infrastructure. You talk about these roads, these railways. Not everybody uses them. Maybe a farmer does not use them, but it's not that he is only likely to use it, but his future generations are likely to use it. You talk about industrial corridors. Who benefits from the industrial corridors by the way of transportation of the goods and services? Let's say vegetables, food and others. They are the common man. So once they are in place, they are likely to benefit every person somewhere or the other if there is growth and there is investment both in the domestic front as well as in the foreign front.
So there is much hue and cry, but the basic thing is that farmers should be communicated well, and that will serve the purpose and make them understand that they are contributing for the country, and at the same time their rights are intact in the new bill or the new amendment.
There should be a social acceptability for the bill that should be created by way of the government going towards them and asking them to contribute in it.
Dr. Yamini Agarwal, thank you very much.
You were listening to a discussion on various aspects of land acquisition bill. The participants were Yamini Agarwal, Indian Institute of Finance, and Ujwal Naryan, senior journalist. It came to you in the program News Analysis, produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. This program is also available on our website news on air.nic.in. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.